Hi, in this video, we're going to discuss the technique called chiaroscuro. And what chiaroscuro does is it uses light and shadow to create three-dimensional form. And what we want to do in our faces is not only use lines to depict the shape of the eyes, nose, and mouth, but then to begin to add tone of shading and highlights and shadow in order to create the portrait as a three-dimensional shape. And so let's look at this slideshow I have, and we will, oops, here we go. And we will look at my two favorite artists. And I say favorite because I have more than two. And this is Caravaggio and Armistisia. Caravaggio is a artist from the late Renaissance, early Baroque period, and he is best known for these deep, dark backgrounds and this strong path of light. That is called chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro means light emerging from darkness, and it is used in art to create strong contrasts of light and dark, usually bold in its contrast, affecting the whole composition. It's also a technical term used by artists and historians for the use of contrast of lighting to create this sense of volume in modeling of three-dimensional objects and figures. One thing that Caravaggio did in his paintings is often have this strong path of light that shines through his paintings. Many times people are pointing, or they're strong directional positions of the body in the composition to point your eye into the direction of the light. And you can really see how light hits the form. And so in this particular painting, we can see how light is shining on the faces of the figures that are pointing towards the light, and there is shadow around in the background. Caravaggio was an artist in the late Renaissance, and he's kind of known as like the bad boy of art. His name is Michelangelo, but he pretty much was known as Caravaggio, not to be confused with the Michelangelo who did the Sistine Chapel. They just seem to have the same first name. Caravaggio was one that did not sketch on his canvas beforehand. He went directly onto his canvas and painted right away with models that were posed in his studio. And he would paint feverishly and then go off into bars and drink and stab people and get into fights. And he lived a short life because of his rebel kind of problematic behaviors, but he is still known as one of the best painters of the late Renaissance. And what we have here is a portrait of an angel, and you can see how the light is coming down. He's pointing. Caravaggio is making the two lines line up with this pointing figure on the bottom, showing that path of light where it's hitting the angel's cheek, hitting the side of the nose, hitting the leg, and then the rest of the work is in shadow. And that is the idea of chiaroscuro, and that's the concept we're going to be working on with our assignment today. Here is a self-portrait of Caravaggio in which he's just using line and a little bit of line tone to create his forms. What we have here are close-ups of some of Caravaggio's portraits. Here is a close-up of the boy's face in the previous painting. First, I want to discuss edge definition. Notice how the side profile of his cheek has a strong defined edge. Same with this, strong defined edge. So where light and dark meet, boom, that should get rid of that outline and have that strong edge. But then when a shadow goes across a form, that is a softer edge. So notice how the face wraps around the form. That shows the edge of the plane of his face, and that's a softer edge that gradates into the shadow area. I also want you to notice that something like a nose that sticks out on your face often casts a shadow onto the side of your face. And so a neck casts a shadow, a chin casts a shadow onto a neck, a nose might cast a shadow onto the cheek. Again, the edge of the nose would have a crisp form, and the edge of the shadow would have a softer form. Looking at this man right here, a close-up of this portrait, notice how the eyes are forward from the deep sockets. So your eye would have a deeper socket, so it's in shadow, but then your eyelids kind of pop out from that shadow. And so notice how the light hit the eyelid and hit the eyelid, and then hit that underneath part of the eye, hit it there and hit it there, because light is coming and hitting the eyes, but the areas that are away from the light are in shadow. And so you want to really think about hitting the cheek, hitting the nose, hitting that part of the lip, and then the rest is in shadow. The hair even casts a shadow onto the forehead. And so really think about your edge definition, crisp versus soft, and that path of light hitting the planes of your face. And so if we look at another one of Caravaggio's paintings, notice that rich dark background and that strong highlight, that is chiaroscuro, light emerging from darkness. And then here we have a beautiful form of Jesus here, strong highlights on the forehead, on the cheek, the tip of the nose, the bottom lip, and the chin. We talked about that already, right? And so here it is beautifully illustrated how the light comes and hits those points. And then we have the secondary tones, the straighter planes, the flatness of the top of the eyelids, the flatness of the cheeks, that indent right here in between the eyes. Those are mid-tone colors because they're not flat planes coming out. They're softer planes like the neck. And then underneath the chin, underneath the nose, in the areas in between the eyes, those are the deepest tones. Notice how the nose casts a shadow onto the top lip. And then next, I want to talk to you about what's called reflective light. As the shadow curls around the cheek of your face, it doesn't go straight to the dark area. There's a thing called reflective light, in which light that's passing down and hitting your cheek would actually hit part of your body and bounce back up. So light would come down and come and hit back up. And so notice on the curve of Jesus's face right here, there's like a medium light tone, and that's reflective light, and that will come down and kind of shimmer along the edge of your face. And notice it on this man's finger. So the highlight is here, the shadow core is within the rounded area of the finger, and then the shimmering light on the edge, that is called reflective light. That's when the light came down and hit the bottom finger and then came back up and highlighted just a little bit of that bottom edge of the finger. And so when you look at Caravaggio's paintings, I want you to really think about how the artist completely showed the path of light, the planes on the face, and the cast shadows of the body on your chest, of your chin on your neck, your nose on your face, and even your eyelashes might cast some shadows onto your eye. The second artist I want to talk about, and again, I'm going to say is one of my favorites, is Anastasia Gentileschi. She is not overly well known, although she was well known in her time period. She kind of came out of fashion a little bit, and she's getting a huge resurgence. So I want all my students to know about Anastasia Gentileschi. Anastasia was one of the first female artists that became famous. She was well known at her time. Her paintings are huge and really, really beautiful. These are two self-portraits by Anastasia. She was a little bit late Renaissance, early Baroque period. Here is one of her most famous paintings about Susanna and the elders. And she painted this painting when she was 17 years old. So just 17. Woo. Her paintings are called allegory paintings because they tell stories from the Bible and other stories. And this is a story about a girl who's kind of being like attacked and bothered by men. Anastasia did a lot of these themes because she is the first woman in the history of the world to ever put a man on trial for rape. And he actually got convicted of rape. And so this was a symbol of her strength as a woman. She became a famous artist at her time, and she became famous for putting her attacker on trial. Unfortunately, it was like a suspended sentence. He didn't go to jail or anything, but it still made the history books that he was convicted of that crime. Again, notice the huge path of light that comes and hits the female form on the face, on the body, on the highlight on the arm. Notice the wrist casting a shadow onto the arm. Notice the arm casting a shadow onto the body. And then notice that beautiful reflective light that we have here on her arm. Sorry. This is one of Armistesia's most famous paintings. You can see that she's kind of getting out that angst she feels about men in her paintings, although this is a famous scene from the Bible. And again, it's that strong path of light. And so look at the way that her face has these strong, distinct edges on the side of her face, and then beautiful cast shadows into the shadow area. But that whole inside of her face is not dark. She has a highlight on her eyelid, a highlight on her cheek, and really that soft edge of the shadow as it wraps around. And look at this poor man who's getting his head chopped off. And notice how she's really thinking about that path of light, so that you can end up painting and drawing figures in all different positions, understanding the planes of the face and understanding what would hit light: a forehead, a cheekbone, a nose, a chin, a bottom lip. And so when we look, notice a forehead, the crisp part of the nose, the cheek, the bottom lip. And then even with this girl with her head facing down, I laugh when I show this to my students going, looks like she's kind of like doing laundry or chopping some vegetables, not holding down a guy while his head is getting chopped off. They don't seem too fazed by this behavior, but the idea of really seeing where the areas in the shadow have still light hitting it, in addition to the areas that have strong highlight on the figures. And so what I really wanted you to understand in these particular examples that I showed you is that once you understand the basic structure of a human face, that is when you begin to show, and just looking at my light right now, how light is hitting the tip of my eyelid, the area of my cheek, the tip of my nose, the bottom of my lip, my forehead, and how understanding that path of light will begin to inform your shading. Okay. And I hope you enjoyed those artists.